Tonight on Currents News, a plan that came together bead by bead, a living rosary taking to the airwaves put together by a string of parishioners.
They were able to get reconnected with their church.
And today is a day of prayer and fasting led by Pope Francis. He's begging God to end the pandemic. Plus this.
The effects of coronavirus hit New York's Chinese communities long before the rest of the city. I'm Jessica Easthope with one organization that's trying to help end the stigma and hunger they're now facing.
Archbishop Wilton Gregory is condemning the murderous attack on Georgia jogger Ahmaud Arbery as the virus of racism. Plus, a new beginning for Catholics in Florida. They're going back to church. The Bishop of Saint Petersburg is here to tell us how the good news is being received and what protocols are being followed.
Many couldn't wait to get back to Mass.
Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Today, in an extraordinary step, Pope Francis led the world and people of all faiths in an appeal to God for an end to this pandemic, asking everyone to fast. The Holy Father is also urging everyone to pray the rosary throughout Mary's month of May, asking the Blessed Mother's intercession in stopping the outbreak. Currents News' Emily Drewby has the story of a parish that's actually living the rosary, but now the tradition is different.
The world is shuttered in the face of the pandemic, but people's faith is not faltering. And Our Lady Queen of Martyrs Church in Forest Hills, Queens is proving that by keeping a wonderful tradition alive with a new twist. Twice a year, the church holds a living rosary to honor the Blessed Virgin Mary with parishioners and clergy.
Then we would go outside the front of the church and line up like a rosary bead. And each person would say a Hail Mary or an Our Father.
But this year, with social distancing restrictions still in place, it wasn't possible.
The reason why we do it is one, to get people to participate in their faith, and two, to be an example for other people.
And since they strive to be a strong example of faith, Father Antonin Kosorek and Dennis Portelli tell us they needed to come up with a Plan B option, so they did this.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
A virtual living rosary with 50 parishioners and clergy happening in Mary's month of May. Significant because it's the month Pope Francis asked Catholics to make a special effort to pray the rosary, a way to unite with believers around the world, asking for Mary's intercession in stopping the pandemic. With this new video, the long-standing church tradition has taken on a new role.
We are connected and we can see each other and we can feel that in the prayers that we are somehow together like God's family.
They were able to get reconnected with their church and reconnected with something that they're familiar with.
They're looking at this as a beacon of hope. In Manhattan, Emily Drewby, Currents News. Back to you, Christine.
What a beautiful new take on an old tradition. Emily, with so much moving online during the pandemic, are Dennis and Father Antonin concerned at all that people maybe won't come back to church once it opens up again?
Well, Christine, Our Lady Queen of Martyrs Church is such a tight-knit community. So while things like the virtual living rosary are great, the parish misses praying and being together. So they're very optimistic that when the church opens, the pews will be filled again. Christine.
All right, that's great. Thanks so much, Emily. And stay with us for more on the desire to be together again in the pews. Bishop Gregory Parks of the Diocese of Saint Petersburg, Florida will be here. Masses there are back. He'll tell us how the good news is being received and what protocols are being followed. That's still ahead in this newscast. Tonight, a story of help and hope for New York City's Chinese communities. They've been getting sick and getting blamed. Asian Americans are feeling the sting of racism since the virus originated in China. And with so many Chinese businesses shut down in the city, putting food on the table is another crisis. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story.
The silence is deafening in Manhattan's Chinatown. A few months ago, these streets were bustling. Now, this endless row of closed metal gates is the reality for the people who live and work here. Chinatown, New York City was one of the first communities shuttered as early as February. Now, 3 months later, the situation is dire. Numbers reported by the Wall Street Journal show in Chinatown only 15% of its roughly 270 restaurants are still open. And in all of New York City, 94% of Chinese restaurants have closed.
People in our neighborhood are so worried. I am very worried. I'm very concerned.
Winston Chu, the chief strategy officer of Rethink Food, is also worried.
A lot of mom and pop shops were closed, so it became a food desert.
Which is why he's doing everything he can to end the stigma and hunger Asian communities like Chinatown and Flushing are facing.
We've actually seen people, not come to our restaurants. One of our main concerns is that Chinatown will not be able to survive the pandemic.
Winston and other volunteers went door to door Thursday in Knickerbocker Village in the heart of Chinatown.
Delivery.
Bringing meals to the hundreds of residents who signed up with their door sticker system. Winston said the food being handed out isn't something generic you'd find at a pantry or soup kitchen.
A peanut butter jelly sandwich down in Chinatown may not make sense, but like something with chicken and rice may be something more equitable or a resource to them.
Rethink Food has been handing out nearly 9,000 meals across the city daily. Every meal means one less person goes hungry until this community gets back on its feet, whenever that day comes.
The Asian shops and restaurants, they close a little earlier than others, and I don't see them reopening anytime soon.
In Chinatown, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
You can help. Go to rethinkfood.nyc and make a donation or sign up as a volunteer. And if you know someone in need, send them to rethinkfood.nyc. We'll repeat the website later in this newscast. There are more people on the unemployment line today. Almost 3 million more Americans filed new jobless claims last week. That brings the total number of newly unemployed since mid-March to 36.5 million as the pandemic continues to take a toll. But it's the 8th week in a row the number for initial claims decreased, which economists say is relatively good news because it means things aren't getting worse. There are calls tonight for the city's health commissioner to be fired. The police union and sergeants union want Dr. Oxides Barbeau to be dismissed from her job. This after she reportedly told a top cop back in March who was asking for more masks for officers that she didn't care about the cops, but in language we can't use on TV. The Police Benevolent Association called her comments unforgivable. Dr. Barbeau's boss, Mayor Bill de Blasio, says he's looking into the incident, and if it's accurate, the commissioner needs to apologize. The mayor also addressed whether schools will open in the fall.
We're going to make that decision based on health and safety. My goal, my plan A, is open schools as normal. That would be the best thing for our kids and families, but only if we can do it safely.
He says if not, there are a lot of plan Bs and Cs to look at as alternatives. And if one whistleblower is right, school may not open in the fall. Testifying before Congress about the COVID-19 crisis, he warned of a dark winter. Camila Bernal has more from the hearing.
Inside the halls of Congress, a high-profile hearing.
Today, we're going to hear about the disastrous federal response to an approaching pandemic.
Representatives surrounded by cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer wear masks as they hear a whistleblower's warning about the coronavirus crisis.
2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
Rick Bright was the head of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, a federal agency involved in developing a coronavirus vaccine. Bright says early this year, he sounded the alarm about a shortage of testing swabs, as well as critical medical supplies like N95 masks and ventilators. But he says his warnings were dismissed.
Lives were endangered, and I believe lives were lost. And not only that, we were forced to procure these supplies from other countries without the right quality standards.
Last month, Bright was abruptly removed from his position.
We have the world's greatest scientists. Let us lead. Let us speak without fear of retribution.
President Trump dismissing Bright's testimony.
I don't know him. I never met him. I don't want to meet him, but I watched him, and he looks like an angry, disgruntled employee.
Still, Bright has a dire prediction. The COVID-19 pandemic will get worse if the United States does not develop a national testing strategy and put in place a plan to distribute a vaccine.
Time is running out because the virus is still spreading everywhere.
Camila Bernal, Currents News.
As states begin to reopen, some are seeing more new cases of the virus. Texas has become a hotspot, reporting more than 1,000 new cases for 5 consecutive days. Some businesses in the Lone Star State just resumed operations on May 1st. Since then, there have only been 2 days where there were fewer than 1,000 new cases. More than 1,100 Texans have died from COVID-19. Here are some more headlines. The country's largest meat producer, Tyson Foods, is cutting prices by up to 30%, at least for now. Pope Francis is making a $200,000 donation to Lebanon, where an economic crisis is worse by the pandemic. And the UN's General Assembly is unlikely to happen in New York this September because of the crisis. A Florida cop fired for hiding behind his car during the Parkland school massacre is getting his job back. Sergeant Brian Miller was terminated for neglect of duty during the 2018 slaughter at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. 17 students and faculty died. Now an arbitrator is ruling Miller's due process rights were violated. He's also getting $125,000 in back pay. There's a lot more news headed your way. Churches across Italy are getting a deep clean thanks to a few good men and women. We'll tell you who was called in to get the job done. Plus, churches are already open in parts of the United States. We'll find out how parishioners are being kept safe. And we all keep hearing about these antibody tests, but what exactly is an antibody and how does it work? Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
It's all hands on deck as Italian churches prepare to reopen in just 4 days. The military has been drafted to clean the ins and outs of at least 337 parishes in Rome. The Army's intervention was specifically requested by Vatican authorities. The cleaning crew includes specialists from chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense teams.
We will all be joyfully united and present to the Lord in prayer, worship, and service.
In the Diocese of Saint Petersburg, Florida, Catholics are starting a new normal. This past Monday, churches celebrated public mass as the state entered its first phase of reopening. But the services aren't the same as they were before the pandemic. Here to tell us more about that is Bishop Gregory Parks, head of the Diocese of Saint Petersburg. Welcome, Bishop. And this is good news. How does it feel to be able to resume public masses? And what's the reaction from parishioners and priests?
Well, first of all, it's good to be with you. And the reaction has been very positive. Of course, the faithful, many couldn't wait to get back to Mass and to receiving the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. So to be able to at least offer that on a limited basis, beginning with daily Masses, was a great blessing to the faithful.
Yeah, you're taking the public's health very seriously. What are some of the precautions that are in place for reopening?
So first of all, we're limiting the occupancy or capacity of our churches to 25%. So we weren't sure the first day we had daily Mass how many people were going to show up. But we did ask our pastors not to allow more than 25% of the occupancy limit. And also we're observing social distancing within the church itself. So pews are marked off, sometimes seats are marked off. There's directional tape on the floor for one-way aisles and allowing spacing like for communion lines and that sort of thing.
How will you enforce the 25% capacity? Like, what if you get more people? Do you turn them away?
No, of course, we don't want to turn anyone away. So what some of our parishes are doing, the ones that would have larger congregations, they're actually setting up also in their parish hall or parish center so that any overflow could be directed to there where they could participate by live stream. And then the priest or minister would come over to distribute communion after the Mass.
And what about communion? Parishioners are still able to receive the Blessed Sacrament?
They are, but the host only. We've discontinued offering the precious blood at this time. It just seemed prudent to do that for health reasons. So the faithful can receive the Eucharist either in the hand or on the tongue. And we have made special provisions for that for those that prefer to receive on the tongue.
Okay, and it's important to note that you didn't open all of the parishes in the diocese. Why is that? And since some churches are still closed, are you worried people from other churches will go to the Mass at the parishes that are open?
So I think most of our parishes did actually begin daily Mass on Monday. There were probably a handful that did not for various reasons. Either they weren't prepared to do so, they didn't have the proper cleaning materials to do so, or the staff. So it's better to be safe in those cases. And so they weren't required to begin daily Mass. They were asked to do so if they felt comfortable with it. So we haven't had any incidences of parishes being overrun with parishioners or with the faithful, or indications that parishioners are kind of crossing parish lines to go to Mass.
And there's no Sunday Mass yet. When do you hope to start that up again?
Well, I'm hoping within at least couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks maybe. I kind of have Pentecost in mind as a possible date, which would be a great day, I think, to begin publicly gathering for Sunday Mass again. But we're also, of course, keeping an eye on the local and the state government guidelines. We're in a 3-phased approach here in Florida for reopening the state, and we're currently in phase 1. I'd feel a lot better about beginning Sunday gatherings, large Sunday gatherings, once we get to phase 2, which would allow for a greater occupancy limit within our churches.
Many other dioceses are not open yet, including New York City, which was the epicenter of the crisis. What advice would you give to them?
I think just to be prudent. Main thing for us was to be safe. You know, we don't want to put anybody, whether it be the faithful, our staff, or our priests or deacons, at any undue risk. So safety has to be the top priority, and not to rush. You have to feel comfortable with what you're doing. Everybody wants to get back to Mass. We want the faithful to come back to Mass, but it has to be a very kind of measured and, I think, gradual approach to doing so.
All right, thank you so much, Bishop Parks, and good luck in your efforts in St. Petersburg.
You're welcome. Thank you, and God bless you.
The debate over reopening churches and other houses of worship is exposing a partisan split in the country. Right now, there's controversy over limiting faith services while secular activities are allowed. A new poll asks if that's a blow to religious freedom. 49% of Republicans say it is, while only 21% of Democrats agree. On the question of blocking public worship for now, 58% of Democrats want services restricted, but only 34% of Republicans favor that. The poll was conducted by the Divinity School at the University of Chicago and the Associated Press. A new development tonight in the killing of unarmed jogger Ahmaud Arbery. Suspect and ex-cop Gregory McMichael was suspended from a Georgia police department a year before the murder. McMichael lost his police certification for failing to complete mandatory use of force and firearms training. He and his son Travis, who are white, are being held on murder charges in the black jogger's death. Archbishop Wilton Gregory of the Archdiocese of Washington is condemning the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. The cleric is saying while our attention is fixated on the coronavirus, another sinister evil is lurking. In his words, the recent brutal killing of Ahmaud Arbery reminds us of another virus that is much older but just as deadly. The virus of racism inflicts hatred, violence, and death in our society and in the lives of far too many people. The White House relies on it, but there's new research tonight showing a COVID-19 test might not work. It promises results on whether someone has coronavirus in 13 minutes. But when a team at NYU studied the results, the researchers found the test was wrong about half the time. The White House is using it to screen staff. The company behind the test, Abbott, is disputing the findings. And we are hearing a lot about antibody tests and how they could be key to getting the country up and running again. But what exactly is an antibody? Mandy Gaither explains.
Antibodies are proteins in the blood that attach themselves to viruses, limiting infection and alerting white blood cells to come in to attack and eliminate the virus. In many cases, if the body encounters the same virus again, the immune system has leftover antibodies that remember the previous infection. These cells can either fight off the virus directly or produce even more antibodies to help prevent the infection. Dr. Sanjay Gupta says researchers aren't entirely sure why this process works so well for some viruses and not others.
There are some viruses that our immune systems seem to easily forget.
Immunity may be short-lived after encounters with some common seasonal coronaviruses, which can cause the common cold. That could explain why we repeatedly get sick with something as simple as a cold, and some viruses like the flu mutate frequently, which means our old antibodies no longer work against new strains.
While most experts do believe that we're probably going to have some protection after being infected with the coronavirus, we're still not sure just how long that protection will be or how strong.
I'm Mandy Gaither.
Still to come on Currents News, the Spanish flu didn't bring her down, neither did COVID-19. We'll introduce you to one very tough woman in Spain. Also ahead, reunited, and it feels so good, especially after conquering a deadly virus. The oldest woman in Spain is now their oldest survivor. Maria Brenas contracted COVID-19 shortly after her family visited on her 113th birthday in early March. She's been living in a Catholic nursing home in Spain where 2 residents died from the disease. Maria is not only surviving the coronavirus, she lived through the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic and 2 world wars. And finally tonight, what God put together, no man or virus can separate. A Kansas couple is certainly proof of that after they both beat COVID and are now happily reunited. Marley Campbell was there and has the story.
These are Dwight Patterson's first steps out of St. Francis Hospital in 6 weeks. After being on a ventilator in the ICU, the 63-year-old Topeka has beaten COVID-19.
Just thankful. I'm just thankful. I'm just full right now.
Waiting with open arms in a parade full of nurses and hospital staff was his wife of nearly 40 years.
Love you.
Ruth.
She's my junior high school sweetheart. We've been together since we were 12 years old.
Ruth knows exactly what it's like to fight the virus. She had just returned from a month-long hospital stay herself, fighting COVID-19 the day Dwight collapsed.
I hadn't even unpacked bags. I hadn't even really sat down too much when all this began to occur.
This could have been the last time we saw each other. She just got home and I had to turn around and go 5 minutes later.
The last time I seen him was when the ambulance was rolling him out.
That was 6 weeks ago.
My honey is back. And I can embrace him and squeeze him and hold him and knowing that he's going to be all right.
When I leave here and walk out that door, life is still changed. This thing is real. People are dying from this every day. So we need to just be thankful for the everyday things we take for granted.
The complete healing process may take longer, but we'll get through it together.
That was Marley Campbell reporting. Dwight says he now plans to pray and reflect with his wife. And that is Currents News. Before we leave you, go to rethinkfood.nyc if you want to help hungry New Yorkers. You can make a donation, sign up as a volunteer, or refer someone in need. That's rethinkfood.nyc. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.